Okay, so we're going to start this with some examples that I want you to try on your own. I want you to go ahead and pause the video and try to work out these two problems and see how you do to make sure you're understanding what you should be doing correctly. All right, press pause. I'm watching. You still need to press pause. Okay, let's go over the answers. We have 3 plus 1 and 1/2. So we're going to start at 3. And both of my numbers are positive here, so I'm going to make sure I move to the right and positive. And I'm going to add 1, so that gets me to 4, and another half. So 3 plus 1 1/2 should give me 4 1/2. Well, I want to check it to see if I don't use a number line to make sure I get the same answer. 3 plus 1 and 1/2. My whole numbers, 3 plus 1 equals 4. And I don't have any fractions there, plus 1/2 should be 4 1/2, so that is the correct answer. Let's look at number 3. Negative 2 5/10 and negative 4 5/10. So since both numbers are negative, I'm going to be moving to the left. I start at negative 2 5/10, and I'm going to move 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5/10. And I should stop at, this right here is negative 7. Okay, let's try our math over here and see if we get the same thing. Negative 2 5/10 plus negative 4 5/10. 5 plus 5 is 0, carry my 1. 1 plus 2 is 3, plus 4 is 7. A negative plus a negative is always a positive, so my answer should be negative. All right, I'm going to write a couple rules down here to see if you've noticed this being true. A positive plus a positive is always going to equal what? A positive. A negative plus a negative is always going to equal a negative. So if you have two positive answers, your answer will always be positive if you're adding them. If you have two negative numbers, your answer is always going to be negative if you're adding them. Okay, so keep that in mind as you're working through. Positive plus positive equals positive. Negative plus negative always equals a negative. Well, that makes it easy if we have the same signs, but what if our rational numbers have different signs? To add rational numbers with different signs, find the difference. So what does that mean, difference? You're going to subtract. Find the difference of their absolute values. So what does absolute value mean? We might need to write that word down. Absolute value. That represents the distance from 0. The distance a number is from 0. So if I have negative 6, and those bars indicate the absolute value. What's the absolute value of negative 6? Equals 6. What's the absolute value of 6? 6. So when you're talking about absolute values, it's always positive. So the absolute value of 200 is 200. It's always a positive. It's just the distance it is away from 0. Okay, so then we use the sign of the rational number with the greater absolute value. So whichever number is bigger, the greater absolute value. So let's look at our first example. During the day, the temperature increases by 4 5/10 degrees. At night, the temperature decreases by 7 5/10 degrees. What is the overall change in temperature? Okay, so the first, it increases, so that's positive, and then decreases is negative. So I have one negative and one positive number. So I want to use a positive number to represent the increase in temperature, and I'm going to use a negative number to represent the decrease in temperature. So 4 5/10 is positive, and 7 5/10 is negative, and I'm going to add those two numbers together. So I start at 4 5/10, and I have a negative 7 and 5/10 here, so I need to move to the left. I'm going to move 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 5/10. I should end up at, right here, at negative 3. The temperature decreased by 3 degrees overall. So let's look at the math on that. So I have a negative 7 and 5/10. And I have a positive 4 and 5/10. My signs are different, so I'm going to subtract 7.5 minus 4.5. That's 0. 7 minus 4 is 3. And then I've got to figure out, is my answer going to be negative or positive? Well, which number has the greater absolute value? Negative 7.5. So my answer is negative. Negative 3 is my answer. Yes, that's the answer I got here. So it worked out. Okay, let's look at the second example. Ernesto writes a check for $2.50. Then he deposits $6 in his checking account. What is the overall increase or decrease in the account balance? Well, he writes a check for $2.50, so that's going to be a negative, and he deposits $6. That's a positive number. So use a positive number to represent a deposit and a negative number to represent a withdrawal or a check. So I have negative $2.50 plus $6. So I start here at the negative $2.50, and I move positive, so I'm going to move to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I should end up at $3.50. Let's try our math over here. So I have negative 2 and 5/10 plus 6. Okay, so actually, let me write it like this for you to make it more consistent. So my signs here are different, so what am I going to do? Subtract 6 minus 2 and 5/10. Remember, you always have to line up your decimals and add zeros as placeholders. Borrow from the 10. 10 minus 5 is 5. Change the 6 to a 5. 5 minus 2 is 3. Okay, let me look at my two answers. I have a positive 6 and a negative 2.5. Which one has the greatest absolute value? The 6 does, and since it's positive, my answer is 3 and 5/10. That's the same thing I got here. So $3.50 is the correct answer. So we need to make some notes about this, right? When you subtract, let me say that again. When you add numbers with different signs, you always subtract and take the sign of the greater absolute value. So when you add numbers with different signs, you always subtract and take the sign of the greater value. When you're adding numbers with the same sign, you go ahead and add and keep the sign. Okay, let's maybe add that up here to our notes. If they start with the same sign, you add and keep the sign. So if they're two negatives, I add and keep the negative sign. Okay, I want you to answer this, and we're going to talk about this tomorrow. Reflect. Do negative 3 and positive 2 and positive 2 and negative 3 have the same sum? So you should probably work that out and show me what your answers are when you do both of those. Does it matter if the negative number is the first addend or the second addend? So when you get your two answers, you'll be able to tell, is it going to give me the same or a different answer? So does it matter which comes first? Okay, you're going to try that tonight and come tomorrow with your answers.